So, well, first of all, thank you all for coming today. Thank you for all of you that were on time and made the effort to come here on a Thursday evening. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank Apocapoc because we are in this space, Apocapoc Nest City Lab, here in the middle of the city, like this urban and garden regenerative and space, I mean, a space for regenerative and sustainable practices. So I wanted to thank Apocapoc, first of all, and also all our speakers here today that I will introduce in a second. But also thank you for their willingness to participate and their energy and all their knowledge that they will be sharing for sure. And I will introduce myself as well. I'm Marta Castillo. I'm a journalist and I work at REVOLVE as a communication officer. That's why I'm here moderating today. And I will just give you a very brief introduction about what is REVOLVE for those of you that don't know us and are new to REVOLVE and the REVOLVE Magazine. So we are a communication group based here in Barcelona and in Brussels. So actually in Barcelona, physically here at the Nest. So that's our house, let's say. And among all our activities, we have the edition and publication of this magazine that you all have in your chairs. So you can find the content. I mean, you can find the magazine published online with content published on a regular basis. But we also curate and publish this quarterly print magazine. So that's why we are here today to celebrate the launch of the latest issue. That is the one you have in your hands. We also put for you some like previous issues in the table there in the entrance. Feel free to take those that I don't know that call your attention or that you find that might be interesting for you. They are all present for you to take home. And yeah, so this is the 51st issue of our magazine. And it's our spring issue that is always focused on ecosystem-related topics. This one, we dedicated it to soil health, as you know as well already, I guess. And yeah, soil health, nature preservation, that's the topic of our issue. And that's why we are also here today to discuss a bit the intersection between soil health and water availability, because we thought that that's also a very relevant topic in the local context. So bringing the big topic of soil health that we see more and more in the European discussion and like in a bit all around, luckily. Finally, we are talking about soils that is like the basis and the cornerstone for everything we need for our life. But we also wanted to link it with a challenge more like prominent and present on everyday life, which is water scarcity, drought, and like something that we are all aware of. So that's why we decided to frame it as this session today. So I don't want to take more time. I will just invite the speakers here today, and then I will give the floor to them because they are the experts. So first of all, we have Oliver Goshey with us today. He's a small farmer, regenerative project designer, and also watershed restoration specialist. With experience in over 20 countries, and he's working at Climate Farmers, and that's also one of the reasons we invited him today, because he works with a growing community of farmers around Europe on developing educational resources and support mechanisms for the transition to regenerative management. So Oliver will be giving us a bit more insights on his work and what they are doing, and also his experience, I'm sure, will be very valuable for the discussion today. Then we also have Teresa with us today. She's a researcher at the CREAF Research Center. She's a PhD in conservation and natural resources, and she has experience in different institutions in Spain, in France and Australia, and I'm sure she will be talking a lot about forest and soil health in forests today. And last but not least, we have Carlos Ortiz here with us today. He's currently leading the Fertilization and Manure Treatment Office at the Department of Climate Action, Food and Rural Agenda in the Generalitat de Catalunya. And his department is the one responsible for coordinating the improvement of manure management and bringing the agricultural knowledge closer to the local level. So I'm sure that's also very relevant perspective that we will be hearing from Carlos today. So I'm not gonna take more time. I think I already took 10 minutes more or less, so that's already a lot. If there's more people coming late, it's okay. So I will go straight to the questions. And we wanted to start this conversation by understanding what is a healthy soil and why they are relevant for our ecosystem. I will give the floor to Teresa first to explain a little bit more about how can we define a healthy soil and why it's so relevant, why we say it's so relevant.
Thank you, Marta, and thanks for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I was just talking to Carlos, and he was asking me, he's like, oh, so are you part of the official soils department in our research center? And I'm technically part of the people working on the above ground component of the ecosystems. However, nothing works without a healthy soil. Ecosystems, agricultural systems, which are ecosystems as well, by the way I view it. And how we define a healthy soil, I think we all probably have slightly different definitions, but I really like one of the things you brought up in the magazine, that traditionally we would just look at the soil as dirt, and dirt is just the physical matrix of the soil, the small particles that come from mainly inorganic substrates. But then the magic happens when we add the biotic component, the organisms that live in that soil, that decompose the organic matter that comes from the above ground compartment of the ecosystem, the litter from the plants, the carcasses of the animals, the little larvae that die and live there. So what happens to all that organic matter, that depends on the fauna, the animals that live there. Next, the microbes, the bacteria, and very important, the fungi that live in symbiosis with the plants, and the fungi that live on the soil, decomposing all that dead organic matter. So if all those components are in there, in the right proportions, in the right ratios of different groups, then things don't work, and the soil is not going to be our partner for whatever service or contribution we're looking into our ecosystems.
With care and properly. Yes. So, who wants to continue? Carlos, Oliver.
Well, thanks for inviting me also to this meeting. Well, according to the definition, standard definition, probably we have different entities, international entities that set this kind of what's soil health, and they put the FAO or even the last European regulation in soils, monitoring soil law also. They speak about that it's the condition of a soil to supply life, and it gives also other qualities like holding water, which is the current issue today, or recycling nutrients, or other actions or essential actions that I think that we are agree about. But I'd like to. I was listening to your question, and there is still really important, probably one of the most important entities in the soil conservation, which is USDA, USDA from the United States, and I was thinking of one of the big events that happened 100 years ago. That was I don't know if you know about that, the Dust Bowl, but just 5 minutes ago, we were talking with Oliver, and he said that he's from Minnesota, so he could probably explain better than me. But yeah, very briefly, the mid plains, the Great Plains of United States of America. There were plenty of grasslands, and when intensification of agriculture came to there, they saw new crops, new cultivars, and very intensive machinery. And then in the early last century, some droughts and high temperatures changed everything. This natural crop system or landscape, and what happened was the Dust Bowl, which was I don't know if you have seen Interstellar film, which is it's like that. It was not science fiction. It took word. It was real. So I don't know if you can add something about that, but the point is that the soil. Well, the president in that time, I don't know, was Roosevelt or anyone. He implemented the soil service in the United States. So it was really interesting because they noticed that it was really important for conservation of not only production, because it was a social disaster what happened in that time, and this USDA also had a new definition of what's yes.
So it was a milestone for
Yes,
soil
of course.
preservation and regeneration. Yeah, I didn't know that. We really learned something today. And
Yeah, that's how the Soil Conservation Agency got started. To build on what you were talking about, with the example of the Dust Bowl, it's a perfect illustration of the macro view of how we work with soils, right? I mean, we talk about this as a key component of an ecosystem, just like an organ in any one of our bodies. And I think the closest analogy to the soil is like our digestive system. It's where so many things are broken down and metabolized in a way that they can be used by plants and reintegrated into the cycle of life that we use for farming, that we use for our gardens, that we use to store water as well. And the reason why things like the Dust Bowl happened is because a whole bunch of people from Europe displaced a whole bunch of people who had been living there for a long time and understood that ecology and how it functioned and the patterns and the ways of life that allowed that to continue. In those cases, it was mostly thin, well, actually, they're fairly deep soils in arid areas that were managed by large moving herds of animals that went through seasonal ways that actually reinvigorated life in that soil. And you bring people who were used to a different cultural dynamic of tillage agriculture from a different climate, and you transplant that onto an area that does not respond to the same interactions, of course, you're going to have disaster. And we're doing that currently with an industrial model of extractive agriculture and broadly applying it all over the world as if soils were the same thing. Your digestive system has different bacteria and a different composition based on what you ate today, what your stress levels are. In the soil analogy, what the parent material is, what the chemical makeup of the minerals where you are, and the cycles of rain and all these other factors create unique little pockets that can't be managed in some sort of broad one-size-fits-all way. And so these are really organs of our body, of our collective body. And we need to learn how to adapt our management to an appropriate way of managing those unique resources that are at the base of the quality, the quantity, and the potential for life of any given region. That's really what soil is to me, is it's that digestive system that makes these cycles work.
yeah, I think that's a very graphical definition of what a healthy soil is. And I think it also brings, makes us all aware of how important is it if we think of our own body, how important is our digestive system. And you already brought it up, and I mean, I mentioned it at the beginning, like we want to bring this conversation into the interlinkages between healthy soils and water availability, like how are both concepts intertwined. And I would like to go back to Teresa for this, so to understand a bit better how both concepts are intertwined and how having healthier soils makes us have healthier water resources and more water available. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that analogy, by the way. Thank you. It's so we tend to think of water only when it comes down from the sky. Okay, it's raining, water's filling up our dams. This is fantastic. But a lot happens from when water falls from the sky until you open your faucet or until a farmer turns on an irrigation system. And we tend to think of that as just a pipe. And it's not a pipe. It all goes through the soil, obviously. And that matrix, what happens to that matrix, it's going to determine the rate at which that water infiltrates, fills up our dams, the rate at which rivers are going to carry water, how fast they're going to get to the ocean, and very important, the quality of that water. So it's not the same to have just a plain slope with a very degraded soil, with no vegetation on top of it. That's probably going to cause just water to flow down that slope very quickly and without the opportunity to filter, to nourish the organisms that are living in that soil, to feed the plants that are living there, and going right into the aquifer or into our streams. And the quality of the water that's going to end up being available for our consumption or to irrigate our crops is not going to be the same as if we had taken care of the ecosystems that are the first filter for that water. Also, we need to think of all these systems that they are connected in a way. So the aquifer is connected to the river, is connected to the dams where we stored our water. It's connected to the water that ends up in our crops, the crops that produce the food that we eat. And we cannot just neglect the fact that anything that we do to any of these points of contact is going to affect the whole system. So we can't really afford making mistakes here. So we need to probably rethink the way we manage our ecosystems, not just to obtain more water from them for ourselves, but instead rethink the equation, turn it around and be like, okay, how much water does the ecosystem need? And then whatever is left that it's not necessary to keep the ecosystem dynamic going, then I'll make a sustainable use of it. So it's in the way I view it, we need to change the equation in a way. I don't know what the Department of thinks of
Maybe Carlos has something to add in there.
Well, about the relationship between water and holding water and the soil, it's obviously studied and probably, well, it's defined by several parameters, obviously also, but mainly it's dependent on the soil depth, of course, and also another parameter is the organic carbon or the organic matter content, which can be of different types, but essentially is that. And using another analogy like Oliver, when we talk with farmers or we talk with people in schools or wherever, we say that soil is like a sponge, and the amount of water that can hold it's dependent on the how big is that sponge and how is the quality of this the material of that. No? So probably, I mean, it's that the point is that we need to protect our soils, to retain soil, because if we lose soil, we have no this potential to hold water or to hold nutrients. And that's one of our main problems in Europe, problem in the world, in Europe also, but especially in the Mediterranean basin, which is erosion of soils and the loss of these soils. And it's because, because of the climate, because we have this acidic soil or this acidic climate, and also because it's because of that, and also it's the reason why we have to increase this capacity of keeping it. So it's the pros and the
The consequence.
The consequence.
Yes. And how do we solve that issue, like that damage that we have done already to soils? Because we know like soils are highly, damaged and like in a poor condition, mostly around Europe, but I would say also around the world mainly. We have been exploiting soils and exploiting nature in general. How do we solve that now? Like, how do we go back? Let's say
we have plenty of agricultural practices, and she talked about not covering the soil. I mean, so a naked soil is very bad for because it's not protected from water when it's raining, and soil, even we didn't know it's losing each time. We can lose 50 tons per hectare easily, which is a lot. 50,000 kilos of soil per hectare a year. It's a lot. So an hectare is one football. So and that's why. But there are several ones we can to avoid plowing or reduce plowing machinery, or the intensity of machinery, to use rotation of crops, to provide with organic matter, which is other biomass materials, or also fertilizers or whatever. So there are plenty of practices that we should promote, and also as administration we should promote. One of the other practices is the keeping the soils in I don't know how to say, without slope, which is with the dried stone walls, which are from our ancestors. We have to keep them because new constructions are destroying them, because from machinery they need to pick us.
Easier to have a flat land that you can.
But they are really important, not only for keeping soil, but also for biodiversity between the stones, and they are well designed because water comes through these stones. It's not concrete; it's just opened. So it's plenty of things to do.
We just need to promote them. We will go back there.
Yes.
a bit further in the conversation, but I also want to give the floor to Oliver, that we haven't heard a bit in the last question. So yeah, like in your experience, or like in your work at Climate Farmers, or like your personal experience, like which best practices, let's say, or which examples do you have of like how to implement that soil regeneration, or like promoting those practices to regenerate soils that are so needed?
Well, so many good practices were already listed here by Oriol and Teresa. Any of them can work, but I've also seen a lot of them that we all know are generally good practices not work. And that's the tricky part. Like, all of these are context specific. I'm probably going to come back to that during a number of answers today, but really, anytime you're working with an ecology, and human communities are ecosystems as well, we need to work to understand the particularities of those ecosystems, as well as the conditions that they're currently under, before we start to say, this practice is good, I can recommend this, cover crops, terracing. Any of these can work, but they can also fail depending on the capacity of the people there, the minerals in the soil, or the way that they're farming and the needs of that business. And so, it's very easy to talk about practices. It's very easy to give recommendations, but it's harder to understand the context of a place and figure out what's actually appropriate to it. And so I would love to say, yeah, like dig ponds and set up balsas and put in terraces and, don't till the soil. yes, but, you know, and I think painting with too broad of a brush can make people feel that they're being told what to do when they might know better, or understand when there are limitations to practices that are recommended or things that are required in order to make it work for their actual business. So I'm very careful about saying, yes, like these are the practices that we should promote. There's great information and possibilities in all of them, but I honestly think the thing that we should be promoting is a deeper understanding and a deeper relationship with the land that we manage. Because only through that understanding are we going to know which one of these practices or combination of practices, it's almost always a combination,
Yes.
is going to work in what time frame, with what investments, you know? And I think that's just as important as understanding the range of possibilities that are there.
How do we do that? Like, how do you promote beyond like doing some more like sustainable practices that will keep the health of our soils or regenerate our soils? Like, let's say, going back to that connection with the land that you are managing in the end, like understanding and knowing what is really needed for your context. I guess also not context only in the nature, but also socioeconomic context, because I guess that's also another layer that maybe we're not gonna enter so much, but that's also.
I mean, like we've all talked about already, all of these things are connected. They're not indivisible, right? Anytime you're working with complex living systems, there's not a fine line in between this is what we're working on and this is what we're not. This is where the ecology stops and this is where the human-built world ends. Those are invented. All of it's connected. And so it can't be devised from the process of understanding what's appropriate. And we can talk about the personal process that I use with clients and with farmers to help them understand their context and work through a process of making decisions and evaluating what options are good for them. But it does look different for everybody. And the process that I work with farmers in our community is really built around one that can be customized and adapted to their needs, right? Someone who is growing a market garden and doing intensive horticulture is going to have very different needs and circumstances than someone doing ganadería extensos grandes, like big terrain and livestock management, or someone who's cultivating cereals. Like, sure, we can all call those farms, but that's a very broad term. And the needs and the requirements of any one of those enterprises needs to be adapted to. And so one of the first things that you can do, obviously, is understanding the climate, the conditions of your soil, the ecology that you're working with. But there's so much more than the ecology. It's the people that you work with, their abilities, their skill sets, their needs as people. And so we always start by creating a more clarified vision of why they are farming. There's easier ways to make money. So what are you doing this line of work for? Most of the farmers that I've connected with are doing this for many other reasons than just to pay their bills at the end of the month. You know, there's so many easier ways to do that. Many of them feel a real connection to the past. Maybe they've inherited their land and they want to bring forward the legacy of their parents or their grandparents and respect that. Many people feel a real connection to the land for personal reasons. They want to produce their own food. They want to build that relationship with the ecology. Everybody has their different reasons. And so by getting clearer about what you're actually farming for, you can start to answer questions like, what does success look like for me? For most people, it's not making the maximum possible amount of money off of their piece of land. A lot of it has to do with balancing time for their family and personal growth and satisfaction as they learn new skills or develop a new project on the place, right? Same with us in all of our lines of work. We have personal goals beyond just making money. And this can guide a process as to, okay, which one of these practices aligns with my values? Which one of these is going to bring me the returns or the idea of success that I'm looking for? And this is why it's different for everybody. This is why I don't just blanket recommend practices or certain implementations, right? Just like with any one of you, it's going to be something different and it's going to change in different times of the year. And
I guess that's why it's so difficult to like make, because I guess we all, I mean, if you read a bit or you know a bit about land management and soil health, like you have heard about all those practices, but it's very difficult to like make broad recommendations, as you're saying, and that the people really take them and implement them first because they feel they are being told what to do. as
Yeah,
you're
definitely
saying.
don't tell a farmer
not
how to
that.
manage their land. I promise you that will get you nowhere.
And then because maybe they test it and it's not working, so they say like, oh, okay, but then I will go back to what I was doing, no, because this is not working. So why I should try out new things? So maybe that's already like a first challenge, I would say, that makes it very difficult, I guess, to do like big scale changes because you need to go very to the case by case.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think both of these two are gonna, throughout this conversation, illustrate this even better. I mean, just because I can't blanket recommend practices and different ideas, doesn't mean that there aren't true patterns in ecology that can give you guidance onto where you might want to go, even within the specifications of your context. Maybe that's where we'll go later.
Yeah, and I think definitely there's things that we know are wrong, like do not pour pollutants onto a stream. Yeah, we know that's not, that's a big no-no, but I was thinking very much about what you were saying about that, incorporating that vision of why someone farms or uses the land in a certain way, why. And I think the communication from academia to policy, it has improved a lot, I would say, in the past 10, 20 years. But probably we haven't incorporated a lot that vision. We're like, okay, we agree, we're good, go do this. And then probably we need to incorporate a bit more, because just as you were saying, it's like, okay, everything is context dependent, but at some point in time, we people like us, we need to provide some guidelines that someone can start with.
Yeah.
And finding that balance between what for sure is not going to work for everyone, but at least is a good starting point. It's not an easy task. And
No, not at all. And I
Yeah.
would actually love to know from both of your perspectives, how you're tackling this as like, there's a very diverse population that we're trying to help
yeah.
in one way or another.
Hmm.
How do you start to address that complexity when you're offering advice or giving guidance?
Because I guess you are the one like working directly
No.
with the farmers, so I
Well,
guess you see.
that's a big issue because you need
Lots of people.
people, yes.
Human resources, no?
Well, we have resources, we have people, but we have also plenty of bureaucracy because it's the current system. We were talking about that before. So the point, well, we had a kind of extension services 30 years ago, but before, I guess it was before entering to the European Unity, it was before European Union. So, and yes, they were born agronomists and that were spread over the territory, and they functioned like that, like real advisors, because they were local from each part of the country, so they knew what was necessary in each part. That's a pity because it doesn't exist right now, and we have a current administration, which I belong to. We are kind of an exception because we are giving some kind of advice in relation to fertilizers and fertilization, and we have other colleagues that give advice with according to sanity and vegetal, I don't know how to say, healthy plant diseases and that stuff.
Yeah.
So pests like that. So we have different units, but it's not like it was before with this kind of distribution, which could be better to enter to the population, to the farmer population. So it's a big issue, and well, we have technologies, we have plenty of ways to addressing to the population, to farmers, but what they probably want is to have someone close to them to learn from its practices and that stuff. So I think it's one of the things that I miss, but we need a change in the rules of this administration. Probably, I don't know, someone is hearing me, perhaps you can take notes, or perhaps they say they fire me.
Virtual option.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant role, and I mean, I also had a previous conversation with Ivo from Climate Farmers, and we also discussed about this role of like the advisor or the coach, and actually, well, I will share it at the end, but at Revolve we are also, it's also in the magazine, we are also working in an European project that is focused on that, on like training. It could be, I mean, how they see it in the project. The ideal scenario is like a farmer, like a leader in the farmer community of an area that can be trained and can be that advisor. So it's someone who knows the context, is there, knows the reality. It's part of the community, so it's not an outsider that is coming and telling you like what to do, but at the same time knows how to identify if the soil is healthy or not, or what is missing, or how to really improve it. But I think, yeah, it's very important what you're highlighting. Like, I guess the situation is very, even inside Spain, no? Like it's very different depending on the region. But I guess it's like the next step, no? Like I mean, for what the conversation is going, and as far as I see.
I said half the truth, because we also have a kind of advisors that are dependent on cooperatives, or that they have their history and their structure, and we have close to 300 or 400 kind of private advisors or related to cooperatives, which are not totally private, but so they can function like that. So it's not totally true what I said, that we have no. I was thinking of the administration, the government, but they are kind of dependent on subsidies or money from the government, these cooperative assistants or advisors. So we have this kind of net, and I guess I think that the government is also working on that. It's some assessment entities, but well, I think that it should be even more important than it's now. More support, I guess.
Maybe have something to add in there of how you see it, or maybe examples of like how it's working in other places that maybe it's I don't know, like an inspiration, no? Because I know like even inside Europe, like the situation it's very different in terms of like advisory services and how this works, and how farmers get support to know what to implement in their land to improve the health of their soil, and in the end, like how to maximize maybe their crops. Or so I don't know if you have something to add on that, on maybe other experiences, maybe inside the Climate Farmers Network.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of seeing a lot of different agricultural systems around the world. I was living in Guatemala before I came to Spain, and before that the Philippines, and before that Senegal. So I've seen a lot of places with very underdeveloped advisory and extension services. So the fact that we don't have one maybe like the United States does with an extension service is hardly the lower end of the scale, let's put it that way. And yet, even places that have very developed advisory systems, I have seen probably most consistently farmers rely on their friends and their family members for advice. You know, there's an inherent distrust in farming communities for professional advice for very good reason. With the change of administrations, with the change and fluctuations in industry, they get told or incentivized to do all kinds of different stuff. And those things change really fast with a voting cycle or a change of a CEO in a corporation, and they're incentivized to completely change their enterprises and what they grow or why they grow it. Those administrations shift, there's different leadership in the corporations, the economy takes a dive, and farm cycles take a lot longer to shift and move. And they're the ones left holding what's left over, right? And so there is a very understandable kind of, all right, yeah, I'll take your advice, but we'll see what I end up doing. And a much closer tie and level of trust in the people around them who are farming, whether it's friends or family members, people they grew up with, people who have similar enterprises nearby them. And we have a pretty good sized community within climate farmers, about 500 different, mostly regenerative oriented farmers around different parts of Europe. And they interact, they have a lot of chats, they share examples and stuff through our community. And the best connections and the most action I have seen have been when they form little groups and go off somewhere else and have interactions and build trust. I've seen companies form out of that. I've seen consulting wings and complete changes of practices happen because they built their little community of friends or people that they trust. They come up with their experiments and their ideas together, and they're in constant contact. That, I think, even in the presence of a very developed extension and consulting service, is where people find their support and their trust. And this is something we hope to enable, and I don't think that a government agency is ever going to supplant, because that's what's there when the administration changes or the university stops its funding. That's what remains.
And how do you enable that? Because I guess that's the challenge.
I feel like I'm talking too much about this stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe they
very
can
happy.
also. I mean, I want to bring like some positive or like some solutions to the conversation.
Mhm.
So we know which are the solutions, no? Like what are all the options that we could be applying, no?
But Oliver, playing a little bit the devil's advocate.
Yes, please.
So a lot of the times, at least when I go to field work and I have conversations with the park rangers or the people that live off the land where I'm doing a certain study with colleagues, and then they give you a super specific concern. It's always something that is super local, like wolves, the new implementation of the law to protect the wolf, or how they are making us plant this pine or that other pine. And a lot of the times they are brutally against some of those things.
Mhm.
And you can understand their reasoning for sure,
100%.
because it directly affects their pockets, their way of living. But also at the same time, someone has taken a slightly zoom out view and implemented certain measures because there maybe have a benefit at a larger landscape scale. So I fully agree that your circle of trust is going to be where you end up deferring to no matter what, for sure. But also we have to balance the fact that that's not where all the knowledge is. We need to implement things like water management. We need to be at the hydrological base level. So how do you incorporate that knowledge smoothly without collapsing with those communities?
Challenge, no? Like I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I was asking. Like
I don't know.
I think like that's a big question, no? Because I mean, for what I see, I read, I hear, like, okay, we know we could be doing cover crops and no tillage and like all these things, and we know how important is soil, and we know all these things, but what is the way forward? Like, how do we, no, let's say, like, bring that knowledge to the people with like, and they are trusting us, because that's the problem, no? Like that's the issue, that you or like the administration or whoever, like, we can have the answers, but then you cannot really transfer it to the people actually implementing, or you cannot show them this big picture, as you are saying.
Well, lack of trust is definitely playing against the implementation of any of these issues. And it's a lot of the times because the same with our education, our healthcare system, our landscape management, everything happens within a 4-year cycle. That is when we vote again. And that's something that it cannot continue having such a short-term view. And we probably, everyone would agree with that we need longer-term perspectives for implementing solutions to such big problems. Maybe that would help regain some of that trust. I don't know. What do you reckon?
Maybe Carlos?
Yes, well, I was thinking that we already have a very interesting net or for diffusion from transferring information to farmers. We have which is a kind of platform with conferences that are taken each day, probably close to 1,000 conferences per year in Catalonia, and other, I don't know, ways to approach into the sector with operational groups and demonstration activities that they connect the farmers with cooperatives and with research center. They work for 2 years together, so we have tools, but probably I don't know the way how they work by themselves, or they have this continued support with an advisor. Probably this is what I think it's lacking. It's not there. But taking as an example, we have other examples of services or advisory services close to us in Navarra. I think it's a very interesting, and it's pretty close, that they have a kind of a group of kind of researchers, but they are going to local, and they have experimental trials in each county or whatever, and so it's well functioning, I guess, there. And also in Ireland with Chagas, also is an example. But I'd like to remark, for example, the INRA in France. I think it's INRA the ones who promote that, but it's I mean the point is that part of the benefits of the cooperative are invested on this kind of research and advice. So answering to your question probably could be that. I mean, how do they feel, or how do they believe in that if they are part of it, and being part of it is giving part of their benefits to this kind of level or organization that is
So
supporting.
involving the farmers,
Yes.
like bringing the farmers together.
Yes.
As Oliver was saying, like we need to put all the farmers and they talk to each other, but also making them part, of that decision-making or research process. And
Yes.
so they feel, the
Yeah.
result more, they have ownership of what will then be implemented.
If they are part of that, they will believe more in that, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
That's it, we have it.
people who have
We can leave
skin
it
in the
here.
game are going to make different decisions than if they're looking at it from outside and being like, yeah, this is what you should do. If you're living with the consequences of the advice that you give, of course, you're going to be more careful about the advice that you give.
Yeah.
I mean, you can use examples like you mentioned of cooperatives. It's a great one that's worked different places around the world. I mean, ultimately, I think we need to divide up administration of ecological resources within boundaries and within jurisdictions that make sense. Like, especially in the United States, we did a horrible job about partitioning land. We just drew a grid on the entire western part and said, okay, blocks like this. Nothing works on blocks. Nothing works in straight lines in the world, right? You need to manage by watersheds and micro watersheds, or soil types, or cultivation zones, or cultural areas, and like meaningful divisions that aren't necessarily separate, but have skin in the game over the ecological resource that they're managing, right? There's fantastic examples too, like in, where is it? In northwestern India, where they, through a collective effort of digging johads and ponds and streams, they actually revived over 200,000 wells and 7 rivers with small incentives, and mostly things that were opposed by the government, just pushing forward, realizing we're on a trajectory for desertification. If we don't work together, with or without money, we're not going to have water here and everything's going to die. So they really cared about it because they lived with it. They didn't work in an office in a different country and say, that's a problem for somebody else, let's figure out how to manage it. They came together and said, this is our livelihood and our culture, and if this dies, we're not going to be here. And they made decisions based on that, knowing that they were going to live with them as well. And I think that we need to start to come, actually, there's plenty of good examples here in Spain too. I think the old Muslim irrigation system around Valencia is still managed by one of the oldest consortiums of jurisdiction in anywhere in Europe. What is it, like over 1,000 years old or something?
Yeah.
There's like a coalition of water managers that figure out how the maintenance and the openings and the coordination of the old irrigation lines work. That's awesome. We should keep that. We should make more of that. That seems to be working if it lasted this long, you know?
And do you all see, because so you mentioned, like, for example, the example of India, no? Like,
Yeah.
you get to an extreme moment where you see, like, okay, we act now, or I mean, there's no way forward. Like, do you see, like, all of you, like, some momentum or like some examples of that happening already in our like closer context of Catalonia, for example? Like, do you see that movement, like those farmers like coming together and saying, okay, like we need to put like our resources here because we need to make this change? If not,
Yeah, I see tons of them, but I'm not from here, so we should ask the people who are.
yeah, and I asked the three of you.
Yeah.
Whoever feels,
I mean, if regarding farming management in the particular context of the extreme drought that we are experiencing right now, I am not entirely sure we are addressing the problem in the dramatic way we should. It's like, oh, let's just put plants that are going to make up water from the ocean, and we'll figure out what we do with all that extra salty, toxic water we soon later words. And instead of rethinking, like, no, hold on a second, we're not gonna have more water in the future. And I do not have the impression that we're implementing very smart measures, at least at the forestry sector. Like, there's now a plan for reducing basal area in certain areas of the Pyrenees to presumably increase the amount of water that would end up flowing in the rivers. The potential of such a measure to work, it's not very big, but yet it's an idea. And also it seems like the plan it's going to be implemented in a careful way, and either way the local communities that are that see the benefits, for example, of extracting the wood out of those forests, they're super excited because they see that there's some benefits potentially involved there. Now, whether that's going to have an impact on the amount of water, and if that's our best idea, I'm not sure we're on the right path.
we're not so optimistic here.
Not really. Maybe you are a bit more optimistic.
Well,
What do you see, Carlos?
Sorry about that, but
You're
my
also
opinion, I think we are, at least in Catalonia, I haven't traveled so much as Oliver, but here in Catalonia, I think we are too much independent. I mean, and I will in our behavior. I mean, for example, in my field, which is fertilization, we are kind of explaining them how about the good agricultural practices, and if we find a farmer that has a livestock farm with cattle manure, and they say, oh, you have too much cattle manure, and you should offer to or sell, even sell to another, your neighbor or whatever. But it's really difficult because even it's the neighbor is using plenty of mineral fertilizers, and we say you should sell them that, and he could be an equilibrium with that. But it's really difficult, and we are working side by side, and we have found plenty of cases like that. So it's a general sense of how they work, but probably, and I'm totally sure that there are plenty of other cases that they play together and they work together. So I don't know, but
your feeling is that there's not so much
Well, it's not
coming
easy.
together feeling and solving
Yeah.
problems.
It's not easy because they work on their own and they think that the most, in this case that I was talking about, the most I apply, the best for the crop, and that's not the case. It's totally wrong. And even economic results could favor them, but it's difficult. I don't know. It's
Do you have
what
any
I found.
optimistic examples in Catalonia, or like what's your general feeling? I would say?
There's so many cool things that I'm only on the cusp of understanding. I just went by the Escola Agricola in Manresa over the weekend and visited a friend there who's involved with soil science and testing. She was telling me about all kinds of organizations. Have you ever heard of Joves amb Talento? It's an organization of young farmers that have access to a network of, I think the ayuntamientos around the province put up parcels of land that private owners either are not using or do not plan to sell. And they give access to those at very low rates and make them available to young farmers. And those young farmers are connected through a network. I think it's like a Telegram group or something. And they share practices, they share when new openings come up, and they work to cultivate those lands at a much reduced rate that gives access to people who otherwise couldn't. That's amazing. That doesn't exist in many places. I know a lot of places that should adopt something like that, and it's happening here. And the resources that are available through the network of agricultural schools, CREAF is a wonderful source of information. I mean, even if you just follow them on Instagram, you'll get a bunch of really cool insights.
Communications are fantastic.
They're really good. They're generally really good. And there's the Planesis model up in Figueras that is helping to inform more people about how to do poly farming, which is just going back to mixed farming like everybody used to have. There's different ones in different comarcas. I mean, the seed network is awesome. Las Lafardas and Lera, two that help to disseminate heritage varieties of cultivars that are fallen out of fashion here. That's something I'm really passionate about, is maintaining the genetic diversity of things that are adapted to our soils and our climate here. That's really worth working on. I know Valles Oriental, where I used to live, has a seed bank in Granollers. Dig around. Catalonia is a wealth of opportunities from the little bit that I know, but these are just a few of them, and they're really good.
Well, connecting to the things that you have said, like you mentioned INRA in France.
Yes.
And you mentioned recovering old cultivars, but I know, for example, that IRTA, which is a fantastic organization here, they have projects specifically devoted to that, to recovering ancient varieties that are actually going to be more resistant and resilient to climate change events. But I wonder how, and this is something maybe you have more insights in, how good is how willing are the farmers to collaborate and get involved with projects at IRTA, or reluctant? I mean, you might think.
In general, you
In
mean?
general, yeah.
No, well, I don't know because I'm not IRTA. I'm the government, the agriculture department, being briefly. But I have to say that when we initiated any experiment or trial or collaboration with farmers, and they say that we are the department, they said, hey, stay away from the first impact is that reaction. But then after just communication, they are totally fluent and we collaborate perfectly. And we have plenty of farmers we work with, and that's no problem with that.
It's reassuring.
So it's been already 1 hour we are discussing.
Oh, that flew by.
And I also want to give some time to the people if there's some questions. But before that, I just wanted to do like a final question wrap up of like what we have been discussing on like keeping it on this like maybe more positive or like optimistic spirit, and also giving some solutions, like what's the way forward. So like if I don't know, like a wrap up idea on like what's the way forward to like let's say improve soil health and make this more mainstream through different practices as we have been discussing, because there's no one fits all. I don't know who has a quick final idea.
Well, I can.
You can go, Carlos.
Yeah, please.
The idea that soil is a finite resource at human scale, so we have to take care about it. Whatever we are, if we are citizens and we go to the mountain or whatever, we are farmers or technicians or whatever. So, and for keeping this resource, we have not to pollute them and not to lose them. So, and if we have the possibility to increase the organic matter, go to it.
Just adding on to that, I think we're moving quite in the positive direction in becoming more conscious of how important soil is for practices and how what's in the soil is going to end up in our plate. But we very rarely think of soils of ecosystems that we don't eat out of. And they're still incredibly valuable and important. And we only remember that they weren't healthy when there's a natural disaster like the last fall that we also missed, flooding. So keep in mind that, yeah, not just the soils that we eat out of, but soils of all of our ecosystems need our attention.
I guess here, and there's like urban soils or like any other, like soil is everywhere. So
Exactly.
we need to be aware of that. Yeah.
So I might go a little different angle on this one.
That's fine.
It's really easy to talk about being nicer to our environment and consuming less. And the narrative around sustainability and reducing consumption is pretty prevalent right now. And if you follow that to its logical conclusion, if you're really good at not consuming or reducing your footprint, where does that eventually lead you? How can you consume the least possible? You have to kill yourself. That's where it eventually goes. There's no way to minimize your consumption to a point of zero. We have to consume to live. And so there has to be a better narrative of how to live in this world than just do the least possible. That's a horrible vision to get us out of this. I'm convinced that there is a potential for each one of us, whether you're a farmer, whether you're taking care of something in the environment directly, or you're looking after your children, or some aspect of your community here in the city, and you haven't touched a plant in a month, I don't care. There is a way for you to participate in improving the quality, the quantity, and the diversity of life on this planet. And quality is making somebody's day better. You don't have to go and dig a hole and plant basil. I don't care. You know, like, I want us all to move out of this. We can just do less and then it'll be okay. You can't go down that route. There's a clear cutoff for how far you can go. Whereas there is no ceiling on how much good you can do when you actually learn to understand the ecology that you work with, build a fundamental interdependent relationship of stewardship with it. And that looks different for everybody. It triggers and connects with everybody else's unique skill set or experiences. Everybody has a way into this. It isn't just the farmers and the foresters, and that's my area. I love working in it. It was amazing that I could get here clean today. My girlfriend's really proud of me. But it's not for everybody, and that doesn't mean that you have to only go through the minimal consumption route to live a responsible way. There's active ways for you to participate in this.
Thank you.
All right, that was a little
I
fast.
hope we are going to do good things when we come out from here. But yeah, thank you all for this first round. And I just and to give you the floor as well, and give you some the opportunity to ask some questions to these super experts we have here in the room today. So don't be shy. Raise your hand if you have any questions. Doesn't need to be exactly about what we were discussing. Like, we can go a bit, like, go a bit deeper on some of the topics we have touched, because it was a short conversation for all the things that we have been mentioning. But yeah.
I'll ask a question.
Maybe you can stand up so we can hear it properly, because if not.
I'm David Smith from WMB. Thank you so much to the panel. I was a little. I had to think a little bit about coming today, because soil health isn't exactly something that is incredibly exciting when you think about it. And I'm sorry, I'm telling this to the panel. You'll probably kill me, and I'll make my way early out so that you can't have a go at me. But it's not an exciting topic, right? So in that sense, thank you for bringing it to life. You created a whole bunch of stories that actually made a connection to this idea of soil health that for me didn't exist before. So first, in that regard, thank you for bringing soil health to life. Oliver, your idea of do good and soil health will be better. I like that. I'll take that home with me. But my question actually is a little bit more serious to this. You mentioned the idea of trust and the idea of communities coming together and the lack of trust that they have within their own administrations. What role do you think that data, AI, and blockchain technology can play within that, and to try and bring around trust down to the community level from an administrative level? Do you think there's a role within that? And if you do think there's a role, what role does that have? And that's open to anybody from the panel that would like to answer. Thank you. I
don't know if there's another question. Yes, so maybe we can take two. And
yes, hi, I'm Carol from Husk. I'm a co-founder of a biochar company here in Barcelona. And my question is, how relevant you think the carbon finance is going to affect the changes of behavior of farmers?
Maybe we can take those two, and then we get the others. So I don't know if who can go for the first one.
Technology and carbon. Who wants
Yes.
to take those?
Maybe we start with the technology, AI, and how to, if this can help, like.
This month's magazine has a fantastic article on that, and that's all I'm going to say about this topic.
Thank you. I don't know.
Well, I have about your question about data and, well, artificial intelligence, and that was probably there's plenty of path to improve on that, but before going to the future or this close future, because it's right here, tomorrow or more or less, or yesterday, but I think that we have other problems to solve before that. I'm sorry, I can't see you. Because, for example, we are working on with the government, with other research centers. We are making some kind of a project with CREAF, with this IRTA, with other centers, trying to understand or to quantify, to identify what we have in Catalonia related to soils, related to agricultural soils, forestry soils, and action related to restoration. Okay, and we like to identify different fields or trials that we have, or areas that we could keep because they are relevant, because we have plenty of data, because we have 30 years of a history of information, and we need and we know that we have to keep on that and to maintain for the future and to work on that. And we are talking with our colleagues. It seems that we have it is not clear the methodologies to monitor or to quantify, for example, organic matter or other stuff, because to simplify. So before going to artificial intelligence or this, which is it's probably the future, and we have to go through there. I don't know with there, but through there. I think that we have to order what we have to convert, to go together, because we are probably 6, 7, 10 research centers and universities that they are working by themselves, and that I think this project is an opportunity to go together and to set initial path. So where are we? We are here, we have that stuff, and we should do this in that sense and going with these methodologies, and we are planning the future. So that could be an interesting point to accumulate data, because we have plenty of data. We have 40 years of data probably, and thousands of analyses of soil, probably most of them related to chemical parameters, phosphorus, organic matter, textures, or physical. But now we are discovering that the biological, microbiological part is important. So we have plenty of projects and research. And this research center is applying for a project and obtaining a lot of resources and money and investing on that. And another on that way, but it seems that this methodology are quite
there's no
difficult.
connection, and
Yes.
yeah, so we
So
need to.
I think the project is really important for that, and the problem will be to how to join this accumulated data that we have. And I hope this artificial
Maybe
intelligence
AI is
gives
the
us the
solution for
solution
that.
to if we are fractioning the organic matter and which is the granulometry or whatever it says. I think we have.
We need to
I
think
don't know.
first.
Yes, and I think this is a project that I believe that could work in that sense if we are going together.
Okay. And who is happy to answer on the carbon farming, carbon finance?
I'll take that one, since the company that I work with is a carbon credit company. That's probably for me.
I felt it was for you, but I didn't want to launch it to you directly.
I hate to comment on this, because I don't work for the side of the company that sells carbon credits or issues them or verifies them. I work on the nonprofit side that creates educational resources for farmers in transition. A little bit different. But what I can tell you from our research so far is that carbon is one single metric in a very complex system, and so it is not an indicator of ecological health. Pretty much everybody who studies carbon knows that. It tells you some very specific things about how soil might be managed. But there are tons of variables. You could be doing all the right practices and it doesn't rain one year, and how much carbon are you going to sequester when there's no photosynthesis in your plants? There's a lot of variables. So carbon is a funny little snapshot. The second thing is we sell carbon credits for one of the highest rates on the market currently. And to make our overhead in the monitoring over the 5 to 10 year period that is required to verify that carbon was sequestered because of the practices of the farmer and not the X number of variables that also could have been involved is expensive. And for that reason, we only start with farmers with 50 hectares or more. That means we discount off the bat 2/3 of European farmers have 50 hectares or less. Okay, so that's not most of them. Then the amount, like I said, on the high end of the spectrum in the market for what they can get for a ton of carbon based on speculation of sequestration based on practices, almost is never enough to change practices based on that monetary amount. Think about it. Farms with 50 hectares or more are working with cash flows that are enormous. The tire from one of their tractors costs more than they could potentially make in carbon credits for a year, to put it in perspective. So these are not amounts of money that are going to radically change any farmer's management plan. So I hope that answers your question. Like, I think it's an important tool in the box of financial enablement of transition, but it is one tool, and it is not going to mark the difference one way or another. We are working on it as a company because we recognize the need to have some financial support when you're investing in a new way of farming. But we also know that this isn't going to make the difference. This is not going to make the change on its own.
If I make a little spoiler, like we will publish next week an interview with Ivo, which is one of the co-founders of Climate.
The guy who knows what I'm trying to talk about.
He answers a few of these questions, so stay tuned.
Yes.
That will come next week. I think we had also, a question there.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I've got a quote that an American farmer is saying that if you want to drought-proof your soil, you have two options. One is biology and one is crop insurance. And so I wonder if your experience in other countries, in countries where there might not be so much subsidized crop insurance, government, is there more attention to soil biology?
Okay.
Because now, for example, in Spain, they've upped the government subsidy of crop insurance as a result of climate change. And my other question was a bit where I lived in West for many years. I would say they weren't independent farmers, they were contract farmers.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't usually. So all this talk about farmers, I mean, you're really dealing with the people who contract them.
Makes sense. And I think there was another question here.
I was just like trying to think about the territory. I wanted to react to the carbon farming comment. Also, I completely agree with what you said, but also it's also another tool that will increase the good practice in terms of regenerative agriculture. So because basically this is going to happen if we capture soil, if we capture carbon in the soil, and this will only be possible and real if conventional farming changes, because probably monitoring this, we will realize that carbon is not that easy to capture in soils with conventional farming. So I think besides what you just said about the conversion of it's gonna probably at the beginning it's not gonna be worth it, or it's gonna be very small amount of money for the farmer. But I think in a bigger context and to put and to link it with soil health, it should be a good tool to really incentivize farmers to go into regenerative agriculture and to really capture carbon to also have money, but also
That's
to
like
better.
It's more like a tool. Yeah. I don't know if there was also another question. Yeah, we take that one up.
Since this is a global challenge where we're talking today, I want to know if you are working with Interreg program, European cooperation to scale and to exchange this kind of experiences, not only between local research centers, but among, I don't know, Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Mediterranean area that maybe can share similar challenges with soil.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that one was for you directly, but I don't know if maybe also Teresa can add on like how farmers take more care maybe about their soil. If I understood right about their soil on
about drought, you're going to think about the biology of the soil. If you get crop insurance, government subsidized crop insurance, maybe they don't care so much. So if there's a difference between developed countries and developed countries in terms of that, if you saw, I know in India, for example, in at least 2, maybe 3 states, they've adopted a state policy, Geomuta or something, some kind of soil preparation using jaggery and lentils, and it's a kind of form of microorganisms. It's called zero input natural farming, and that's been adopted as state policy. Which you can't really imagine that happening in Europe so much.
I mean, I've seen a lot of different things. I think that in general, subsidies were created for good reasons. Most of the ones that we are currently seeing the effects of right now were post-World War II implementations in order to hedge the looming famine that was coming out of the destruction of Europe and other places and having to compensate for that food production. So keeping people out of famine is a great idea. I'm all for it. But subsidies are also a really great way of keeping afloat methods of farming that don't work anymore, that are not competitive. And the other reason that they are still such a big portion of, let's say, Western, relatively rich countries, is because if we didn't have them, we would not be able to compete with the global trade prices that other countries with lower paid workers and a lack of security in their systems are willing to sell crops for. So it's there for a reason. But by continuing it, you will perpetuate the current status quo. It is all funneled towards continuing to do things the way they have been done. And it's all under the guise of maintaining food security within the continent. So That's kind of what I've seen. In places that don't have it, yeah, they're more adaptive, but there are so many other forces going on, urbanization, industrialization of developing countries, different pressures that come from, like where I was in Guatemala, the fluctuation of coffee prices was the main cash crop in the area. And so it's not just a matter of whether you have incentives and institutional support for a way of farming, but also all of the other things that make choices for farmers. Much like you said, most of them are like contractors. A farmer these days is a technician. There are very few farmers that really spend their time in the ecology, looking at soils, doing. You get a contract to grow this much stuff in hopes that you will be able to sell it for the price that they tell you they'll buy it for by the end, which is almost never the case. And they tell you what they want and what they're willing to pay for it. If you can scratch out a tiny margin of profit in that, good for you. You're going to farm next season. If not, good luck. Take out more loans. You go into the cycle of debt. That is not unique to places where there are subsidy systems. That also happens everywhere else too, with less support, with less insurance, with less security. So it's a factor, but it's definitely not the only one. And I see a lot of similar patterns even in places with less security.
Okay. And maybe to the
Yeah.
cooperation, let's say.
I can take that one.
Okay.
I think at least from the perspective of the institution where I work at CREAF, definitely yes. We do address this type of challenges in international consortiums. There are interregional projects. There's also Horizon 2020 projects that involve multiple partners, and actually the European Union has a specific line of projects that funds practices that are going to implement climate smart agricultural practices to make agricultural farming practices an ally in our quest against climate change. So yeah, definitely that's something happening. So some good news.
We are trying to cooperate, yes.
Yeah, I know
and
you
learn
are.
from each other, even if it's slow, but we are there.
Mhm.
So we are gonna leave it here for the discussion. We will have now, after we finish, time for few drinks. So whoever stays, and if you stay, like, you feel free to ask our panelists, but I will leave it here. I want to, like, also building up on your answer and what this question was about. Yes, I mean, well, as I think I mentioned it already before, but one of our also roles at Revolve is, I mean, we work and we support these type of projects, like cooperation projects at European or like maybe like even bigger scale. Yeah, to make these changes possible and to learn more from each other and to like improve well, these practices. And I wanted to bring up today one of these projects. Actually, I guess, well, you got some leaflets on your chairs. It's a project I already mentioned. It's an European project from the, so the European Commission put up these 5 missions, and one is specifically focused on soil health. Actually, in the magazine, you have an editorial from someone from the mission, like the person leading the soil health mission. So there's also a European movement around that, and we are trying to support that change. And this project is working on something that came up in the discussion, which is the advisory services and like how to support farmers and like transfer that knowledge from like between peers in the end, because that's the only way that we see it's possible. So yeah, I wanted to mention the academy, which is something that it's coming up within this project. Is a prototype course of 2 years, thought and designed to train advisors, so people that is already giving advice or people that is willing to learn and like improve their knowledge to give advice, all focus on nature-based solutions and sustainable land management. So that's, I think, a super cool resource, open for everyone, free, and it will include like online learning, but also on-site activities in different countries in Europe. So I think I'm sharing these, and I think that many of you in the room might be interested, and that's one of the resources. And I mean, we also have here, and we will have some time now to check it, but within the project, we are also developing another tool that is a set of visioning cards. So also to enable these discussions, like let's say a visual language, no? Like a tool that can help enable this discussion among farmers and other stakeholders to identify the challenges, to identify the context, and to see which are the potential solutions. So these are cards that are also, it's a prototype for now, because the project it started like a year ago, more or less. So we are like fine tuning and like within this academy, we will be testing, but I also brought them, they are there in the table. They will be available for download online. And I mean, we are happy to whoever is interested, or like, I don't know, if you think it's a resource that might be useful for you, like just reach out and we will be happy to support. And yeah, the last thing, it's something, maybe we can make full screen, Marion, if there is a mouse there. Just one last thing, I will leave this slide here, but as, well, just to wrap up, that's a REVOLVE resource, because the magazine, and I want to close with the magazine, it's, I mean, it's let's say sustained by contributions of experts and people that, like Oliver or any of the panelists here today, like are passionate about the topic they're doing, or they have a project that they want to show, or they have the knowledge because they have been doing some research. So we are always happy to welcome any contributions, and we are happy to support the people in editing and putting together an article, an editorial, an interview, or even like a photo article. So that is like, for example, the one you see in the middle of the magazine. So yeah, that's the way you can join our like roster of experts, as we call it, of sustainability experts. And that would be a way for us to reach out to you if we have, like, we need an expert for an interview, for example, or if you have a topic or a research that you want to put forward to contribute in a way to be on the print magazine or on the online magazine. So yeah, just if you want to, feel free, scan the code and register. And yeah, thank you everyone. There will be time for some next now. Thank you.